With thousands of kilometres of coastline and isolated ports, Australia has long been a country where goods can enter quietly and disappear just as fast. And decades ago, when migrants from southern Italy began arriving in growing numbers, a few of them carried more than luggage. They carried connections, quiet ones, the kind that didn't show up on forms but settled into small towns, produce markets, and port communities. By the 1950s, authorities were already noticing clusters of Calabrian-linked families in Victoria, New South Wales, and Western Australia. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just slow, steady influence wrapped inside ordinary businesses. And year by year, that influence hardened into something far more organised. By the 2000s, major investigations revealed what had formed: hidden networks, encrypted communications, and shipments measured in tonnes heading toward Australia's shores. So the question is, how far does this network reach today, and what still lies beneath it? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's begin. They arrived quietly, mixed in with thousands of migrants searching for work and stability. But among the suitcases and paperwork were ties that went back generations. Connections built in small Calabrian towns where loyalty was a currency of its own. Australia didn't know it yet, but the country had just received the early threads of networks that would settle deep into its soil. One of the first documented hints appeared in 1922, when the passenger ship Re d'Italia docked with men later linked to Calabrian criminal traditions. They blended into Italian communities that were growing across Melbourne, Perth, and Sydney. They worked in trades that didn't raise suspicion, handling produce, transporting goods, managing small supply routes. But behind those simple jobs were family structures that stayed tightly knit, kept their own counsel, and operated in ways outsiders rarely understood. As the communities expanded, certain territories became pressure points. Melbourne's Queen Victoria Market, a place meant for everyday business, turned into a quiet battleground during the 1950s and 60s. The conflict, now known as the Market Wars, wasn't loud or showy. It was strategic. Families clashed over access, control, and influence behind the scenes. Names like Barbaro, Sergi, Papalia, and Italiano began appearing across decades of investigations, their influence stretching far beyond a single stall or trading lane. By the late 1960s, these groups had embedded themselves so deeply into local commerce that their activities became nearly invisible. And as Australia modernised, so did they. By the 2000s, journalists and researchers were tracking how the same families used import businesses, trucking companies, wholesale operations, and cafes as effective cover. A delivery route wasn't just a delivery route anymore. It was a way to move items without drawing eyes. A warehouse wasn't just storage. It was a shield. This is where the shift truly began. What looked like ordinary family business slowly turned into a framework, reliable, discreet, and built on generations of trust. A structure strong enough to support something much larger. Because once those roots were established, the door opened to a different kind of opportunity. One that didn't involve produce, but carried far higher profits. For years, nothing looked out of place. Trucks moved in and out of markets, forklifts carried pallets, and crates of fruit rolled through warehouses without anyone giving them a second thought. But while the routine looked ordinary, something else was forming behind it. A shift that didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, through opportunity, connections, and the kind of knowledge that comes from working close to the ports for decades. The families already understood the system better than most. They knew how cold chain containers travelled. For years, nothing looked out of place. Trucks moved in and out of markets, forklifts carried pallets, and crates of fruit rolled through warehouses without anyone giving them a second thought. But while the routine looked ordinary, something else was forming behind it. A container carrying tightly sealed packages. The same documents that explained a legitimate shipment could be adjusted just enough to hide something far more valuable. By the early 2000s, the pattern became clearer. Businesses that were supposed to be harmless, transport companies, wholesalers, cafes linked to import routes, doubled as covers. A truck pulling in at sunrise looked no different from the dozens before it. A warehouse full of boxes looked like any other storage site. The strength of the system was simple. It blended into everything around it. And as the network grew, so did the imagination behind concealment. National investigations uncovered shipments hidden inside marble slabs, tucked into engines of refrigerated units, sealed in food tins, and buried within complex pallets. These weren't isolated ideas, they were methods refined over time and repeated because they slipped past inspectors again and again. With the flow of goods came the flow of money. Suddenly, luxury vehicles, suburban homes, commercial properties, and crypto accounts became storage spaces for profits. Millions of dollars in assets seized during major Australian raids revealed how quickly illegal earnings could be folded into the legitimate economy. This wasn't a side operation anymore, it was a machine, steady, organised and protected by businesses that looked completely normal on the outside. And once that machine was running at full speed, all it needed was a route strong enough to carry the product across oceans. Before the messages, the cash trails and the arrests, there was something far more basic holding everything together. Freight. Cargo moved every hour of every day. And the people behind Australia's cocaine pipeline understood that long before they understood anything else. If you could move boxes, you could move almost anything. And once they learned the rhythm of shipping routes, they learned how to slip something hidden inside that rhythm without drawing attention. The network didn't announce itself. It built its routes far from the coastline, in waters where surveillance thins out and large vessels can wait without being questioned. Those vessels carried tons of product packed for long passages. Smaller boats would then leave from the mainland, travel hundreds of kilometres offshore, and meet them under low light. The exchange was quick, quiet, and rehearsed, a handover in the middle of the ocean that left almost no trace. That system stayed invisible until one mistake brought it into the open. In the world of organised crime, secrecy is everything. And in 2021, a new device promised exactly that. A secure phone sold as encrypted, untraceable, only for trusted users. It spread through word of mouth, picked up by those who believed they had something to hide. What the users didn't realise was that the trust was engineered, and the phone wasn't theirs at all. It was controlled by law enforcement. Everything changed on June 8th, 2021. Before dawn, coordinated teams struck in dozens of countries nearly simultaneously. Doors were forced, vehicles were pulled over, and countless phones lit up with police activity. What officers already held were tens of millions of intercepted messages, months of communications that laid out how criminal networks talked, planned, paid, and moved product. What was once hidden was suddenly visible. Australia quickly became one of the major scenes in this operation. Within months, more than 300 people across the country had been charged, linked to conversations that connected suburban warehouses, trucking depots, storage units, and coastal logistics. More than 6 tons of illicit drugs were tied to intercepted chats. Names once only whispered became connected to shipment identifiers. Cash pickups showed up next to coded emojis. Even plans for offshore transfer points appeared in clear text. For the first time, investigators could see inside the networks rather than guessing at them. Messages revealed not only assignments and routes, but the hierarchy of command. Who was trusted? Who answered to whom? Who paid whom? What used to look like rumours and patterns now formed a timeline. The sting didn't just disrupt plans, it forced a reckoning on how criminal organisations communicate. Courtrooms saw new debates on digital surveillance and privacy. Legal challenges followed. But even those fights couldn't erase the impact. Entire networks were fractured, long-standing routes were exposed, and the illusion of secure secrecy collapsed. Because in the underworld, secrecy isn't just protection, it's power. And once that veneer was broken, the trails led somewhere else entirely, to the money that kept the whole system running. Once a shipment slips through the docks and the couriers step away, the loud part of the operation ends. From that point on, the work becomes quiet, almost invisible. No engines, no meetings, no signals, just money being moved until it no longer looks like money that came from crime at all. This stage doesn't rely on bravado or threats. It relies on understanding how the financial world works and how to hide inside it. The basic idea sounds simple. Blend illegal profits with legal activity. But in practice, it's a maze built on layers meant to confuse anyone who tries to follow the path. Cash becomes bank deposits. Deposits become company revenue. Company revenue becomes property or vehicles. And once the money has changed forms a few times, the original source becomes harder to see. Australia has watched this happen in real numbers. In 2022, A major international probe froze more than $10 million in assets. Everything from homes and luxury cars to jewelry and cryptocurrency. Then in June 2025, another network collapsed in Queensland after authorities seized around $21 million spread across bank accounts, properties and high-end vehicles. One investigation erased an entire financial footprint built over years. The techniques behind these schemes are designed to look ordinary. Small import businesses are used to absorb unexplained income. Fake invoices back up suspicious transfers. Nominee accounts hide the names of those actually benefiting. Real estate trusts conceal ownership behind layers of paperwork. Even expensive cars or watches become tools easy to buy, easy to sell, and perfect for storing value without leaving obvious traces. And then there are the people who make it all possible. Accountants who prepare the right documents, brokers who send money offshore, company directors who sign agreements without ever questioning what they're authorizing. It takes only a few professionals willing to ignore the details to turn tainted cash into something that fits neatly into the legal economy. This isn't just laundering, it's survival. Money that could expose a network instead strengthens it, funding the next shipment, the next contact, the next expansion. Some criminal networks rise fast and collapse just as quickly, but the ones that endure, the ones that survive raids, arrests, and decades of pressure, usually have something stronger than money holding them together. They have family. And in Australia, the Calabrian clans proved how powerful that foundation can be. The families who arrived in the mid-20th century didn't just build new lives, they built a structure that mirrored the village networks they left behind. Names like Papalia, Barbaro, and Sergei repeat across decades of Australian investigations, not because they sought attention, but because their influence quietly passed from one generation to the next. These weren't flashy operators. They were steady, careful, and deeply interconnected. Take the Papalia branch in Griffith, New South Wales. What began as ordinary business ventures gradually evolved into something far more strategic. Profits from hidden crop operations in the mid-1900s were believed to be worth tens of millions of dollars, money that didn't sit idle. It was pushed into hotels, restaurants, land holdings and property developments. On paper, it looked like legitimate success. In reality, it blurred the line between legal enterprise and criminal reinvestment. And history shows that maintaining this power wasn't gentle. In the 1970s and 80s, a series of high-profile killings and disappearances shook the region, pointing to internal disputes and territorial control. These incidents weren't chaotic outbursts. They were signals, quiet reminders that loyalty had rules, and breaking those rules carried consequences. Over time, the families grew not just through birth, but through marriages, sponsorships, and migration chains linking Australian towns back to small Calabrian villages. Elders chose gatekeepers. Gatekeepers mentored younger relatives. Knowledge about routes, contacts, trusted couriers, and financial channels was passed privately, like an inheritance. A legitimate business might house a backroom meeting. A longtime family friend might double as a fixer. Every generation added another layer, and that's why these dynasties persist. When one figure is removed, another steps in. When a director is jailed, a relative signs the next set of documents. The story so far, the roots, the phones, the money, is not the end of anything. It's the groundwork for what comes next. And the next phase isn't quieter. It's bigger, more scattered, and harder to control. Across the Pacific, criminal groups are redrawing their maps, shifting away from older channels, and testing new ones that stretch across thousands of kilometres of open water. Recent events show exactly how far they're willing to go. In late 2025, regional authorities discovered a narco submarine and more than 2,600 parcels of cocaine believed to be headed toward Australia. The haul carried a street value in the hundreds of millions. 4 Ecuadorian nationals and 2 regional crew members were arrested, and investigators continued searching for the semi-submersible vessel used to transport the load. This wasn't a random find, it signaled a shift toward long-range smuggling that avoids traditional shipping lanes. Around the same time, a separate operation in French Polynesia intercepted over 1.5 tons of cocaine and methamphetamine on a single vessel, also suspected of being bound for Australia. These seizures point to a larger pattern. Traffickers are now using private yachts, sailboats, and other low-profile crafts to carry product across the Pacific. far from the heavily monitored container ports. And while these interceptions make headlines, the numbers inside Australia tell the real story. Border authorities have seized tens of tons of illicit substances in recent years. These spikes don't just show stronger enforcement. They show a supply chain under constant pressure, but still operating at massive scale. National assessments estimate that organised crime costs the country billions annually, with the drug market representing a large share of that impact. So the future isn't a clean win for either side. When one route is detected, another emerges. When scanning technology improves, concealment techniques evolve. As global shipping expands and new communication tools appear, traffickers gain more places to hide. It's a constant chase, one where every success forces a new tactic and every disruption pushes criminals to innovate again. What you've just seen isn't a single story. It's a structure built over generations. From early migration ties to global shipping routes, from encrypted phones to multi-million-dollar laundering webs, every piece shows how deeply organised crime has settled into Australia's ports, streets and financial systems, and even with huge seizures and major stings, the framework continues to adapt, reshaping itself each time pressure hits. So the question now is this: how much of the real pipeline remains hidden behind ordinary businesses? And will future investigations uncover the full picture or just the surface? Share your thoughts below. Like the video, subscribe, and thank you for watching.